And we all have a lot to learn, but I think the experience of racism is something so often people think of homelessness, poverty, hunger, all these things as an idea, not as an actual lived experience. And history, as we've learned it, is so often an intellectual idea, but the fact is it's based on the real history is the real living of it. And that's what the people of the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood have done in sharing their stories and bringing their stories and allowing their stories to be heard by others. And there's just such beauty in that. And the building of institutions, of organizations, the creation of a community that loved and took care of their children and made them safe. So many people said, they never knew what was going on because they were protected by their parents. Remember Buster Thomas talking about hearing about lynchings, but it was always a whispered conversation. And he wanted to know what it was. It was, and then he talked about how he started finding out that information. So there's so many stories here. And I guess I never would have guessed when we started that this book would end up telling this story about slavery and segregation and injustice in the North. So it's kind of exciting that it's gone that deep and that it has that much to teach us. I was trying to think today earlier, a couple of days ago, about how to organize my talk. And I heard more on the news, and I'm not going to even say the name of the main destroyer in office. But I can't, it just makes me sick. And I guess I heard the Civil Rights Commission was going to be trying to attack affirmative action. And one of the things that's been so clear to me from the time I started working as a newspaper reporter in the 70s is that Black excellence is such a threat to white supremacy. And there are these, you make a leap forward in any area, and then there's, it's like that seems to be happening all over again. The attacks are so vicious. And so I thought I'd look in the book for some inspiration and see what quotes I wanted to use. And I was going to get somebody to read them, but I guess I want to tell you what happened to me as I started reading from the back of the book. I started reading some quotes, and I just kept reading them, and I thought, this is what we need. This is what we need to hear. And I wanted to read you some of those things that I read, and then I'll end with a story about Reverend Robeson, and then we will have our panelists kind of give some responses or thoughts of their own. Just a second here. Pardon me. I wrote down, 291. Sorry. Okay, this just happens to start with a quote from Joan Hill. And there are more things by everybody in here that I would like to read too, but this is just the lineup that I read, and it just happened that they were in order, but I want you to know how relevant it is to our life today. Joan Hill. I think that if by some miracle Martin Luther King just happened to come back to life, he would be very, very saddened by the current state of affairs. I think it is a sin and a shame the things that they have done to our black men because one race is afraid of them. I think trying to stop affirmative action is terrible. I don't mean giving anyone things that they don't deserve. We work for it. I think that it is unfortunate that Black people, people of color, still have to work extra hard to get ahead in today's society. When we were coming up, we helped one another. Now it's the haves and the have-nots, and the haves don't care about the have-nots. I see a lot of adults not liking what the kids do. The kids do the same things that we did, and we have to appreciate that the kids do, but guide them also. Don't stop them from having visions and the ideas they all have. Each era has their likes and dislikes, and we need to work together to help each other. We really do. Hey, Joe Moore. I think for every Black person, whether they shovel the snow or whether they're a professor laureate or Toni Morrison, the question is whether or not you can make a legitimate contribution to your society, and for that contribution to be accepted as a legitimate, bona fide contribution. I can read anybody who's Black, and the same question emerges. How do you penetrate the white psyche to say that we can make a contribution to the society which we are a part of? The whole essence of being human is to pass through this life contributing. We have to have the ability to penetrate racism and say that we can make contributions. We have made contributions. That's an understatement. And that's all I was about on a little parochial, provincial level in a little small town called Princeton. And here's Florence Twyman, who died in 2001. My first husband, Walter Harris, we married in 1936, and we moved to John Street. He was a policeman, but to supplement his income, he also worked at the eating clubs as a houseman. He was the first Black policeman killed on duty. He joined in the 1940s and was killed in 1946. He wasn't on that long and was treated pretty well, but then he had grown up here and it made a difference in those days. It was a different time then. They knew that Blacks would stay in their place. But now, after civil rights, they're worried because Blacks are getting, I'll use it, uppity. Now we have racial profiling and all, but it's nothing new. It always stayed in the closet. You know, nothing just starts. It's always been there. And then later she says, nothing really changes, it just looks different. The schools are almost segregated again now because the whites move out. You know, the community park school is a controversy. You hate to go around thinking you have to keep your guard up, fists up. Do you sit there and defy them or what? It's hard to know. Okay, this is Joe Moore again. I would like to be optimistic for my daughter and my son and my grandkids and for Hank Pinnell's grandkids and his sons, but I'm not really optimistic. I don't know how to put this, but you wake up and the difference between you being born white and me being born Black, it's evolution, you know. It's a quirk that is going to make our experience dramatically different. We're made of the same particles except for the color of our skin. And then having to live a life of penalization for that? Okay. And this is Johnny Dennis, who was nearing 100 when she was interviewed. She's one of my favorites in this book. I never wished I was in the world better than anybody else. You know, so many people think they are better than you. They want to change you. But you can't change if God made you. You're not just sitting in a corner like a cat. You don't sit around in one little place. You see them people walking on Nassau Street, passing each other, use the same table, drink the same water. Life. If they respecting each other, they happy. And then this is Buster Thomas. We have to get involved with the school system here and find out what new initiatives can help many of our students, because we need to start at the kindergarten level to try to avert the problems of dropouts. He talks about some other things, and then he says, my attitude was bad from like 4th grade on, and it was so bad, even in sports, they would not allow me to take phys ed for a whole half year. This is Buster, for those of you. That kept me off the honor roll. As I said, I wasn't getting answers on something I really wanted to know. And that made me a real problem, speaking out of turn, saying the wrong kind of things, trying to encourage other students to do something other than what they should be doing. But I had a lot of people that were working with me for whatever reason. I think of Mr. Holmes, who spent a lot of time with me. He was very interested in young people. He took me to my first Harlem Globetrotters game. He and his wife had like a young people's group, and he had Y teams. So I had a lot of guidance. I mean, there was a genuine interest. You felt that somebody was chastising you because they loved you. They cared for you, and they were hoping that you would do better. Everybody had a stake or interest in you growing up to be a nice young man or woman, and they saw that as part of their responsibility and maybe even duty. I really feel sorry for youngsters today because they are out there dealing with things that they don't know how to deal with. It's funny, but I have a sort of a yearning for those good old days. We made our own fun, and there was a lot of interaction between us. We didn't have television, but we had our broken bats and balls. We used to put stuff together, play hopscotch, boys and girls, pick up sticks, and all that kind of stuff. I think in a sense we had everything we needed. Not everything we wanted, but everything we needed. I wish a lot more kids could experience that. And then this is Jay Craig. I tell young people today that an education beyond high school is of primary importance, beyond the college level to a master's degree or a doctorate. If I were growing up now, I would have gone to college without even thinking of anything else. I would have done something with government, something where I might have ended up in the State Department or in Congress of the Congress of the United States, or who knows, maybe president. I'm not stopping there, you know. I'm sure that is applicable to so many blacks in this town and every other town. We would have gone to college, but we couldn't. I mean, me and my sister Lois, we never thought of it. We had very little resources, very little money. And then Romus Broadway. Compared to my own children, I grew up in an era with a lot of segregation, which kept me on my toes. Because my children are not exposed to segregation, there are hidden dangers that they cannot see, and there are a lot of things that they take for granted. By and large, I haven't seen much change in the world. People have been changing their focus, but not their attitudes. I would say racism has for a long time been cultivated at home as a difference between black and white. I don't find whites altruistically accepting of blacks in the same way that they accept themselves or their family members and friends. The persons who are responsible for this racism must change. They know what the golden rule is. It's not difficult. I cannot change a person's heart. They have got to change. And okay, I have two more here. Three. Okay, this is Frances Broadway Craig. The only thing my mother and father said to us was, you treat people the same way you want to be treated. Period. The end. And I'm not saying that we didn't know there was a difference between black and white. You know, Stevie Wonder could see that. But honestly, that was what was always instilled in us. Always treat people the way you want to be treated. Leonard Rivers. In some ways, racism is worse today. Back in the movement when we were in Mississippi, someone said, "How did you survive that?" You survived because you knew what you could do. The line was drawn. People would call you nigger to your face, and then you knew you had to deal with it. They told you, "I don't like you. I'll help you." Today, that line is not there anymore. You've got to guess. You wonder what they're thinking. Some of the people, you think they're supporting you, but when you walk away, they're calling you names and taking away opportunities. And that's tougher to deal with. But racism is alive and well. Don't let anybody tell you racism is gone. It's a little harder to distinguish sometimes, but it's still there. My father taught me, and we were all taught in the John Witherspoon area, that you take a negative and make it a positive. You could take that negative and say, "Ah, crap, what's the use?" But you got to take that negative and say, "Well, hell, if that's what you think, stop me if you can. I'll work a little harder. I'll do what I've got to do." I think the black community now, we've got to go to the polls, we've got to start voting, we've got to start participating, we've got to start reaching down, pulling other people up. For a long time we used to hear an expression, "I made it, you got to help yourself." I'm beyond that, and I never look back. He's quoting that. Well, as black folks, we've got to look back. We've got to look back and grab somebody and pull them up. Actually, two more, and then I'll go on to... Okay, this is Donald Moore. There are so many stories you can tell about people. How do you feel being black? Let's suppose you lived here, and you're white, and you go pick up your paper in the morning. Both your neighbors come out, and they are both black. You get in your car and head for your office, and as you look around driving, most of the other people are black. And then a policeman pulls you over, and he happens to be black. And you give him some guff. He handcuffs you and takes you to the jail. Most of the people there are white. They take you to court, and the judge is black. This is what we live with. So living in this society, we have to say, hey, let's see how we can sort of get past this. Life tends to go on. You don't want it to get worse. You want it to get better. That's a little music to accompany us. Okay, and then this is the last story. It's by Robert Rivers. As my father got along in age, he joined the crowd that get up in the morning and walk up to Nassau Street. And they stand and up there and talk and reminisce and do all these things. It's amazing all the good things and the bad things, the bumps and the bruises, and you still end up with the bottom line. He knew he had a son who went to the university and one who coached baseball there. And my mother, she's still alive. Can you imagine the satisfaction she has having 4 grandchildren who've gone to Princeton University? Times have changed, but you have to be careful because sometimes they haven't. Every once in a while, you can see this stuff coming back. There's an old Princeton still floating around out there, but on the other hand, what's happened to Princeton in the last 50 years, I never would have believed. We've come so far. I never would have predicted all these wonderful things that have happened and would have happened. I have to say Princeton has defined my life. For better or worse, it has defined my life. So, now I'm going to read you a final part. Okay. I thought I was going to print this all after the other, make it really easy, but then when I went to print it didn't work that way. It was printing other pages, so I decided, okay, never mind. I think most of you know the story of William Robeson, Paul Robeson's father. He was born into slavery in North Carolina, and he escaped during the Civil War and came north to Lincoln University, where he learned Latin, Hebrew, and Greek, and received 2 degrees, and became a minister, and met another seminarian there at Lincoln University who was Bustile's, what was her first name? Louisa Bustile, who was his life partner and the mother of 7, they had 7 children together. And when they married, they came to Princeton right after their honeymoon, and he became the minister of the Witherspoon Street Presbyterian Church. And in 1898, which seems like a long time ago, a black person was being lynched every 4 days, which is not unlike the numbers of black men and women who are killed every 4 days now, often by our own police. And at that time, they were very upset about what was going on, the residents of this neighborhood. And so Reverend Robeson, along with some other ministers and a good friend who was the superintendent of schools, Abraham Denny, they both met at Lincoln University. They held a meeting at the church to write a letter to President McKinley and protest what was going on. So they got together, and what the paper said about their meeting later, and this was one of the rare instances when there was coverage of something going on in the black neighborhood, they said their addresses were carefully prepared and eloquently delivered. They advocated no violence, no retaliation. They opposed violence in every form. They thought there should be Christian sentiments enough to prevent such disgraceful outrages as all these lynchings. They thought it possible to enact laws to enable the general government to protect all its citizens. That's what the meeting was about at the church. And the people in charge of the white presbytery and other people in the town were quite alarmed by this meeting. And I think that Superintendent Denny was fired within a week, and it took the white presbytery a year to get out Reverend Robeson. But his job was taken from him, and he moved around the corner to the place on Green Street, bought a horse and buggy, and became an ashman. Put on his overalls and drove students back and forth. And Paul Robeson, who was a little boy at that time, grew up. He was born in 1898, so he was a baby when a year old when his father was fired. So he grew up seeing the heap of ashes grow in the backyard, and seeing his father keep up his work as a minister among the people, and never blinking an eye, never complaining about what happened. And I want to end with what happened when Reverend Robeson was giving his final talk at the church. After Reverend Robeson was forced by the all-white governing body of the local Presbyterians to resign from the post he had held for 21 years, he preached a farewell service. On that occasion in 1901, every seat in the pews and gallery of his church was occupied. Chairs and benches were placed in the aisles, and many people had to stand in the rear of the beautiful Witherspoon Presbyterian Church. In his remarks, Reverend Robeson made no mention of the Presbyterians' action. He thanked his own congregants and those from other black congregations who were there that day. In concluding, He enjoined his hearers, as he must have been telling his own heavy heart, "Do not be discouraged. Do not think your past work is in vain. Gird on your armor and with renewed courage strive to do well the work the Master has assigned you, daring you ever to do right, to be true. Remember, you each have a work to do that no other can do. And in doing it so kindly, so truly, so well, angels will hasten the story to tell." Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so now we would love to have responses and thoughts from the panelists, whatever you'd like to comment on.